We are back. This is a live shot of President Joe Biden inside the convention hall where he will give remarks. We had a live picture up of his landing at O'Hare International Airport. He got on helicopter Marine One and took a short chopper ride over to Soldier Field and then a brief motorcade to the convention hall. And there he is looking at where he will deliver this speech that we have been talking about tonight. Mike Memoli, are you close to where he's standing?
Yeah, Nicole, viewers may have noticed that every time you spoke with me, I was inching closer and closer to the stage. And now you can see that the First Lady is actually at the podium right now doing that walkthrough. It's an important opportunity for her to get a sense of the room, to look at the crowd as she will be seeing it in a much fuller capacity tonight. Now, the order of the program as she does her testing, mic test 1, 2, 3 from Dr. Biden, will be for her to make some remarks. And as we understand it, she wants to speak most directly to those Democrats who did remain loyal to her husband. We remember that handwritten note that she posted to Twitter after her husband made the decision to step aside. And now we do see President Biden stepping closer to the podium himself here. And at some point, I'm going to get the shouting voice, give up the golf voice here to see if we can get the president to maybe answer a question or two. But Mr. President, is this a bittersweet moment for you at all? Mr. President Joe Biden saying this is a memorable moment, not a bittersweet moment here. And think about this, Nicole. This is the 13th Democratic convention that President Biden has attended. He has been to every Democratic convention since he was even too young to serve as the U.S. Senator when he was running in 1972. He only missed the 1988 convention because he had suffered those aneurysms. And so he's been the headliner in a 2020 convention that was radically altered because of COVID-19. He spoke in very prominent roles in 2008 and 2012 as the vice presidential nominee, and at other times supporting good friends of his like John Kerry in 2004. This is obviously going to be a convention unlike any other, and this is something that he's been working very closely with his advisors on over the course of the past weekend at Camp David to make sure he's striking the right tone. This is something he does feel very important is part of his legacy, making sure that his vice president succeeds him as the next president of the United States.
Mike Memoli, I heard from someone who's spoken to him recently that he's doing great, that he feels, all the pain that anyone would feel in sort of abandoning a run that he very much maintains was winnable, but that his successes as president are resounding. The hostage release, the ability to focus 100% on his final months in office, and seeing the reception of his hand-picked successor. What's your understanding of sort of the mixed emotions that he's feeling on this night?
I think one of the most interesting parts of seeing him over these last few weeks is the way in which it seems like a burden in some ways has been lifted. One of the things that it's been fascinating to me covering him over these last 3.5 years is the ways in which the office that he aspired to his entire adult life, the presidency, really almost made it harder for him to practice the kind of politics that made him so successful. The bubble of the presidency made it hard to get that touch and feel with ordinary Americans. The obligations, the really impediments of maybe being able to speak his mind as freely as he used to, even as vice president, maybe took away some of that common touch, that common feel. But what we've seen from him since he's made that decision not to seek a second term is him feeling much more free to speak his mind, to frankly make fun of himself in ways that he wasn't always able to do. And one of the things I've been hearing from some Democrats is, where was that Joe Biden for the last 3.5 years? We would have maybe liked to see a lot more of that President Biden. And I think for the next 6 months, we will see that. Aides have told me that he's going to take some time. He's going to cede the spotlight to Kamala Harris for the rest of this week. He's going to be spending some time in California huddling with his close advisors who have been working to really build a plan to develop ideas, what he can still accomplish through legislation, through executive action, especially through foreign policy, where he does have a wide amount of latitude. You heard a question maybe about the hostage talks. talks and potentially a breakthrough in some of these negotiations between Israel and Hamas. That is a part where he can certainly continue to burnish his legacy. I was trying to get Jeff Zients to join me on the air, the White House Chief of Staff. He was just to my left here earlier. He declined the opportunity, even for you, Nicole, to appear live on your show. But he has been at the tip of the spear in trying to develop this plan and to make sure that this president can end his presidency with has a lot more work to do, and he's determined to do as much as he can while he's still in this office.
You know, Claire, as Mike is sort of talking about the strategy and all of the latitude that, and I opened the hour this way. You know, the Biden-Harris-Walz political phenomenon is unprecedented in American political history, and the opportunity they have, him now as sort of her validator. And as a surrogate for her is part of why, you know, Trump's son has been blotted out, right? He can't get any oxygen. They're almost too big of a story, the three of them together. What he did and the fact that Trump is still sort of spiraling, can't wrap his brain around it, is still tweeting or wherever he posts things, talking about it in a way that is so detached from the reality of this moment for the Democratic Party.
Yeah, I mean, Trump keeps saying at his shrinking rallies that that Biden hates Kamala Harris. Well, I mean, this is just another example of where Trump tells America, hey, you don't see what you see, because it's pretty obvious they like each other a lot. And it's pretty obvious that they're a great team. And, you know, and I think another thing we have not talked enough about in terms of Joe Biden, he gets credit for so much. He became vice president because of his mastery of foreign policy. I think, truth be told, I think Barack Obama knew he needed someone who was really strong in that area. This is not something that he had really specialized in for that long a period of time compared to Joe Biden and his knowledge of the world and world leaders, but also the people he surrounded himself with. I mean, he has an incredible cabinet. They have done really good work. There have been no scandals. No one's been arrested. No one's been convicted. No one has been charged with criminal conduct. And, you know, the list is long in the Trump administration of people who were charged with criminal conduct. We don't even have time in this segment to go over all the people that were charged with criminal conduct in the Trump administration. Yeah. Joe Biden knows how to pick people around him. And I think when he picked Kamala Harris, he knew what he was doing. And I think he's proud of that selection. And I think you're going to see that pride tonight.